And as we pause to reflect on victory in Europe 80 years ago, we will go back in history to the week the war was won, in May 1945. It is almost 80 years to the day that Winston Churchill announced to the nation that the war in Europe was over. VE Day marked the end of nearly 6 years of war that had destroyed homes, families, cities, and cost millions of lives. The news of Germany's surrender, when it finally came, was not altogether surprising. Berlin was already in ruins, and many in Britain were on standby to begin the celebration. Here's the historian James Holland on how the events unfolded around May 8th, 1945.
This was the British people's finest day. VE Day, the end of the German war.
Up and down the country, people spent the 8th of May 1945 celebrating.
Here at Buckingham Palace, the King and Queen and the Prime Minister Winston Churchill were cheered by vast crowds when they appeared on the famous balcony.
London was partying. In cities, towns and villages, there were street parties and plenty of carousing after 5.5 long years of war.
The end came in something of a rush. By the beginning of May 1945, Germany lay in ruins and large numbers of enemy forces began surrendering.
And unconditionally, as the Allies had insisted.
The people sensed that the hour of complete German defeat in Italy was at hand.
First in Italy,
Defeat is written in every ruin of battered Berlin.
then to the Soviet Red Army in Berlin on the 2nd of May,
In an old and tattered tent.
to British Field Marshal Montgomery on the 5th of May, and then to the US 6th Army Group in Bavaria that same day.
At 2:41 on the morning of Monday, the 7th of May, German commanders surrendered all remaining forces to General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander in the West.
The German delegation, headed by General
The signing took place at his headquarters in the French city of Reims. Churchill prepared to announce a surrender that afternoon. But Joseph Stalin, the Soviet leader, refused to agree to any announcement until the Germans had formally signed a surrender to the Red Army in Berlin. This, he announced, would take place at 1 minute past midnight on the 9th of May, Berlin time.
But there was another twist, because on the afternoon of the 7th of May, German radio broadcast details of the surrender. The cat was out of the bag.
Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight.
Churchill now decided to ignore Stalin and persuaded President Truman that the 8th of May should be considered Victory in Europe Day.
Finally, the German surrender was then completed at 43 minutes past midnight on the 9th of May.
Field Marshal Keitel, chief of the German High Command,
Which is why the Russians still celebrate victory that day rather than on the 8th.
our dear Channel Islands, as Mr. Churchill called them, are free again.
And it was also on the 9th of May that the Channel Islands were finally liberated too. The crowds filled the streets, but not everyone was celebrating. Not the vanquished, not the millions of displaced, nor many who had lost family and friends, and nor those in the Far East and the Pacific still fighting the Japanese. They would have to wait a further 3 months for the most cataclysmic conflict in the history of the world to be finally over.
While we have time, let's quickly go to the live shot at the Vatican. As you can see, we're still waiting and watching for any smoke to rise from the chimney over St. Peter's Basilica, where those cardinals are meeting to choose a new pope. No smoke yet. We'll, of course, bring you more on the News at 10 here on BBC One and on iPlayer. And, of course, you can follow live news here on the BBC.